Hello there, dear listeners. Grab a hot chocolate, maybe a tea, maybe something stronger, because the Haunted UK podcast is on Patreon. So if you want more great content about ghosts, UFOs, strange creatures, mysterious disappearances and all things haunted, then get yourself over to our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/Haunted UK podcast. There you'll find 3 amazing tiers, packed full of goodies and bonus material, starting from just £3 per month. Ad-free episodes, community chat rooms, exclusive Patreon-only material, such as our 2 new mini-series Talk Haunts and Tour Haunts, are just a few of the many things you'll discover. So be careful now. The next person to join our Haunted Hub at Patreon could be you. I just need to ask, before we start, Danny, just one favour, if you wouldn't mind. Mm-hmm. Could you just say, I'm Danny Robbins, and this is the Haunted UK podcast.
I'm Danny Robbins, and this is the Haunted UK podcast.
Welcome to Talk Haunts, Danny Robbins, for our Christmas special. We are so excited to have you on. You need very little introduction to our listeners, Danny. You are, of course, the go-to for all things paranormal, the creator and host of Uncanny, the podcast, the stage show, and now the TV show, as well as the Battersea Poltergeist, the Witch Farm, and author of Into the Uncanny, and, of course, the amazing play 222, A Ghost Story, which has captivated and stunned audiences, including us. We're incredibly happy to have you here to discuss all things strange and supernatural.
I'm very happy to be here. Happy spooky Christmas.
So, Danny, you are quite busy at the moment, and you're filming.
I am. I'm filming the next series of Uncanny at the moment, which will be out early in 2025. So, yeah. We've been out and about filming all around the country and recapturing the magic with Kieran Evelyn dissecting the cases. So it's been really fun. It's been lovely. The first TV series was quite a nerve-wracking experience because you go through that thing where you've made something that's good and that people like, and everybody goes, "Don't ruin it," and like literally, my social media was full of people going like, "Don't screw it up! Come on, isn't it better when you can't see them?" And so it was really interesting. We had to invent this whole kind of way of doing it, this kind of visual language, and how do you make it spooky when somebody's describing an experience like this to you, and how do you bring it to life? On the podcast, we have the sound effects, and on television, we found this way of bringing it to life for these moments of kind of, recreating what the person saw in a kind of nightmarish, expressionistic kind of way. And it was just brilliant. It was fun. And it was, the lovely thing about the telly is that it's longer. It's an hour. You can deep dive into things. Yeah. You can go to the places. You can have scientific experiments, all these kind of things. So I've loved that. And I think, but coming back after having made a series and knowing what it is, it's really exciting just getting your teeth into it again. And we've got some brilliant cases. I cannot wait to share the cases with people.
I can't wait.
Yeah, again, we absolutely can't wait to tune in and watch. I mean, I personally love the way that you actually do it, because I love the way that you actually base the kind of thing in a studio. So you've got it stripped back and you're seeing the real witness. It's not a reenactment and things like that. I really, really like the way that's done. How long did it kind of take for you to do that transition? And was it your idea to translate it, to move it from a podcast and launch it as a TV series? Or did somebody literally come along from the BBC and say, "Look, Danny, this is really big. we've got an idea?
I think it was a mixture. I think, like I'd been through this quite mad experience on the Battersea Poltergeist where I went from making this in my shed during lockdown and somebody who'd kind of made audio most of my life, to kind of varying degrees of success, and then suddenly making this thing where I had literally had Hollywood producers calling me up on a Sunday afternoon and demanding the film rights. And, it was on front pages of newspapers and, kind of breakfast TV news in Australia and all this kind of thing. So that was kind of quite crazy. And we'd had this whole experience where the film rights were bought up by a Hollywood company and it all got very exciting. But actually when Uncanny came along, we thought, well, look, it makes sense to try and make a TV version of this. We'd like to do it, but it's really got to be on our terms. We really want to, kind of make the show we want and be true to the show. And so we talked to various people, and the BBC was obviously the natural home for it because it was a BBC podcast, and they just, it felt like a place where we could really make it the way we wanted, and I think, and reach out to this big community of people. And I think there's something about a show about the paranormal being on the BBC that just gives it this kind of funny stamp of credibility, I think. The fact that the BBC, this kind of bastion of, journalism and documentary making and, all these great programs we've seen on the BBC over the years, doing their take on a paranormal show, I think that does probably bring a lot of people to it who might not normally come to a show like this. So that was great. And then, I just think we sort of had to find our way of it, really. And we had this brilliant commissioner, Jack Bootle, who, is the man who commissions lots of David Attenborough documentaries, but also happened to be a fan of Uncanny and had listened to every single podcast and really loved it. And so, we were coming from that starting point, I think. And it was just great to talk about how to do it. But obviously you get a lot of things wrong at first and you're kind of like, do we do this? Do we do that? And, the early edits of the first series definitely didn't feel uncanny. And it took a while, it was a kind of a process of back and forth with a big team of people kind of cracking it, really. And I think, ultimately, I think it came down to something which I would just say is great advice, whatever you're doing. If you're interested in doing anything that is, well, probably anything at all, basically, but it's take risks. I think the BBC took a risk commissioning it. They took a risk in letting me kind of stay true to my vision and doing it in certain ways. It doesn't behave like your average TV program. There's lots of unusual elements to it. And I think it was a risk for us to kind of bring it across from the pod and, kind of, what would it be like? Would it work on telly? And I was really bricking it at points. I was like, God, this is totally new territory. But somehow that process of taking risks did, give birth to this brilliant thing, that I love and I'm really happy with.
Well, it really translates well. It's great on the on TV. I love it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's great. So you started out as a comedy writer and documentary maker, and then you moved into investigating the supernatural stories with your first podcast, Haunted. Have you always been interested in the supernatural?
I have, yeah. And I had done other things about it in the past. I'd made a little series for the ill-fated Channel 4 radio. There was a time when Channel 4 launched a radio session back in, I'm going to say maybe the mid-noughties or mid to late noughties. And I made this little series called Danny Robbins Investigates, which looked at various supernatural things. I went to places like Woodchester Mansion, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with. And
definitely.
Looked at some UFOs up in Bonnybridge in Scotland. And, so I had done things. And I'd done this comedy show at the Edinburgh Festival once, which was kind of like a pastiche of Most Haunted called Live Ghost Hunt. So I'd been dipping my toe in the water over the years. And it came from a very deep fascination with it, really, that kind of stems from being a kid looking at all those books about ghosts, like The Osborne World of the Unknown, that people of a certain age often find themselves quoting, and, watching Woman in Black on stage. And I was really, really interested in ghosts. And there was something about it that it was a real itch I couldn't scratch. I think, it's trying to make sense of the universe, isn't it, basically? And I think I came from an atheist background, but my mum had been a Catholic. And when I went to visit my grandparents, their house was full of books about the Pope and pictures of Jesus and all this sort of stuff. And I was aware that there were people out there who believed in something bigger and, a sort of set of mysteries, a kind of form of magic, if you like. And I loved all that idea. And I don't think I ever found myself gravitating towards religion, but I did find myself really gravitating towards the idea that there was some magical force in the world. And I guess for me, a massive part of being drawn to ghosts is that, and I use the word magic, and I think because it's just at the heart of the human experience for me, that idea of the deep, profound joy and incredible kind of just transporting quality of discovering that death isn't the end. Death is the scariest thing we face as human beings.
It's a comfort, isn't it?
The thing that, takes no prisoners and
Yeah.
kind of there's no escape from it, and the idea that there is some antidote to that I just love. And for me, the whole search for answers about the paranormal is driven by this deep optimism, this idea of hope and of life beyond death, I think. And I think probably as a human race, that's why we're fascinated by it. It feels like
a fundamental question.
Humans are always looking for answers to stuff, aren't we?
Yeah.
And it's potentially the answer to the biggest problem we face.
And I in the book Into the Uncanny, which I love, by the way, I loved it when you were talking about visiting your grandparents who were Catholics, and about all the sort of Catholic iconography that you saw with the Sacred Heart. And I could really relate to that because my grandparents used to have the same thing. I think they had a glow-in-the-dark Sacred Heart,
oh,
which
wow.
was quite handy. But do you think you sort of talk about this missing out on a Catholic upbringing? Do you think that's kind of what led you into an interest in supernatural?
I think it was part of it. I think, missing out is a funny term, isn't it? 'Cause I think, I was always aware of the absence of that, I guess. But I think, just inevitably as a kid, you rebel against what your parents do a bit, don't you? So, if your parents are Catholics, you become an atheist like my mum did. And if your parents are atheists, you kind of find yourself wondering what's out there. Because, any kid ultimately gets to a point where they start wondering if their parents have got all the answers or not, And I think... I've definitely found myself fascinated by belief throughout my life, and I have been fascinated by religion as well. And the people who really keenly scrutinise my CV might see I wrote a sitcom about monks at one point. So I did find myself for that going and visiting monasteries and that kind of thing. So I've definitely been fascinated by it, and I love the idea of it. I think I love the idea of religion in some ways. I love the idea of a kind of greater meaning to life, and somebody taking you under their wing and guiding you, and fate and all that kind of thing. Because I think uncertainty is terrifying, and I think the idea of a purposeless universe is terrifying. But well, for me anyway, I mean, maybe not for some people, but I don't know. But I've never ever felt close to kind of signing up for religion. But I do find myself with this very deep desire to believe in ghosts. I never describe myself as a believer. I definitely still feel like I'm a skeptic who wants to believe, but I think, I absolutely love it. I love the idea of it. It's what drives me. And I definitely feel like, there was this period of time in the 19th century in Victorian times where so many things were being invented and discovered, and there was this amazing fervor of kind of finding new species, finding cures for diseases, discovering electricity, discovering new parts of the world, maybe, whatever, these kind of things. And I'd just love to feel that everything hadn't been discovered, and, that we hadn't kind of reached the threshold of all of our knowledge. I love the idea that there's something more lurking out there in the shadows for us to try and creep towards knowledge of.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm very, very similar to yourself, Danny, in the sense that I am an atheist, but I'm an open-minded skeptic. Very, very much an open-minded skeptic. I will not lambast a witness or anything like that. Marie and myself, the doors are always open for, on our shows, such as yours, for witnesses to come forward and share experiences which are incredibly personal to them and can be very, very disturbing. So to have the bravery to come forward in the first place to tell you those stories is amazing anyway. But for them to give you the permission to broadcast them, and then that then feeds other witnesses to come forward, which again is why I feel Uncanny especially. It's been the huge gear that has begun to get this movement going again for me. I think I actually sent you a comment on Instagram and said this to you, Danny, about, all the accolades that you're getting fully deserved, because it's opened the doors for podcasts such as ours, for people to come forward and to have the confidence to come forward and share. And I know that the experts, you have a purpose for them, but oh my God, sometimes I'd love to give Kieran a hug, but sometimes, but it's,
I love it. For every person who says "Oh, Kieran O'Keefe, he drives me mad," there's somebody else who goes, "Oh, Evelyn, hello,
Evelyn."
I love it. I love it that you can take your sides, and it's like the wrestling. You can shout at them and cheer them on or shout at them. I think it's lovely that you say that, about the way that you sort of feel like it's opened up a discussion again. I mean, someone came up to me at a live show we were doing and just said, why haven't we been talking about this for so long? And it was an interesting thought. Like she sort of said, like, back in the 70s and the 80s, there were these shows like Arthur C. Clarke and, Strange But True and these kind of things where we talked about the paranormal. And then, I don't know, I think the paranormal became defined by a certain kind of thing for a long time, I think. And it was very much packaged as entertainment. All of those shows, like, I mean, I loved Most Haunted when it came out, brilliant entertainnment, but it was very much entertainment, I think just that thing of, and it was also, the other thing is it was obsessed with places. You'd go to like a castle or a stately home, whatever, and investigate it. And I think in a little way, the people got forgotten. And I think there were lots of people out there having these experiences and kind of not quite confident enough to kind of step forwards and kind of put themselves on the line in that kind of show. And I think that, what we found in Haunted, what we found in Uncanny is just legions of people out there who are sitting on these experiences, just not knowing how to talk about it, and actually just creating a safe space where people could talk about it is powerful, I think. And I think so many people who've kind of passed through our show have felt it deeply therapeutic, really cathartic. And I love the fact that we're talking about this again. I love the fact that, all of these different opinions and beliefs that people have on this big spectrum, whether you're, a hardcore skeptic or whether you're an ardent believer, you can enjoy these stories in your own way. And, and I love the fact that, here I am, you've got your podcast, I've got my podcast, there's other things springing up. There's a lovely boom of paranormal broadcasting at the moment. There is. It's driven by people and their experiences. It's very experience driven, and just listening to people, listening to these life-changing moments for people and not seeking to impose answers necessarily, not seeking to impose judgment, but just allowing people the time to open up and talk about it. Yeah.
I mean, I do think it is definitely, well, I can't say definitely. If Kieran does listen to this, I didn't say definitely, Kieran. I just believe that the paranormal is an area of science we are yet to fully understand and discover. And that's why I am an open-minded skeptic. But going back to Uncanny, my favourite episode of the whole show so far, and this one gives me goosebumps even now, was the Elizabeth...
Oh, the Elizabeth Dacre case. Yes, the return of Elizabeth Dacre in series 1. Yeah.
Yeah, it was because of the house that it was in, which was part of the influence for Cluedo, wasn't it?
It was a hotel that had been set up in the 1930s, I think, and it had been the basis for Cluedo, basically. I think the original version of Cluedo was called Murder at Tudor Close, which was the name of the hotel. Yeah. And then now it had become houses, and our witness was living in one of these houses.
Yeah, when you, at the start of that episode, when you said we haven't got one apparition, we've got many. I just thought that case, it was amazing.
You had, wasn't it?
Yeah, apparition after apparition after apparition. And then on top of that, you had time slip events that were going on in it. But in your entire career so far with the paranormal, with Haunted, Batsy Poltergeist, The Witch Farm and Uncanny, is there one episode, Danny, that has actually sat with you all the way through and you do think, even if Kieran, say, gives his opinion or Evelyn gives hers, you do think to yourself... yeah, that could be the one. Personally, that could be the one.
It's a really good question. And I think it's probably hard to choose one in just the same way as you'd never choose one of your favourite children. But I think, I don't know, like, Haunted was really interesting. So Haunted, the first series I did, came basically out of just friends and friends of friends. It was before I had this kind of network of people writing to me. And it was just, I was researching for my play, 222, A Ghost Story. And I just basically asked on social media, is there anybody I know who feels they've seen a ghost? And I just got all of these replies that kind of busted. I think I had a prejudice at that point. I think I probably was like, saying to these people, you're not the kind of person I thought would have seen a ghost. I think at that point I was thought maybe there's a certain type of person. And what I've learned on this journey is that that's just total rubbish. There isn't in any way a type of person. It can happen to anyone at any moment in their life, and I think, so some of those were really profound. They were like, the dad of a friend, or like, somebody, I knew quite well. There was, a guy who I'd worked with, I knew really well, who told me this incredibly powerful story where he wept talking about feeling like contact from his mother. So those were really powerful, and they stay with me. A lot of those stay with me. There was an amazing double episode we did called The Night Shift about nurses at a now demolished hospital in London that, just was an amazing story. So they stayed with me. But I think there was one story that I didn't get to tell during that series that then became one of the first episodes of Uncanny. And it was a story called My Best Friend's
I
Ghost,
love that
which was
one.
about
Yeah.
this woman who felt that she saw her best friend's ghost, but also then had this strange experience where she went to see a medium and thought the medium was completely rubbish and was like, don't believe in mediums, didn't enjoy that, it was crap. And then the medium came up to her and grabbed her and just said, I got this message for you. She didn't want to say me to say it during the show, but... And then she said the exact dying words of the best friend, which were incredibly specific and used a nickname. And that sent shivers down my spine.
So moving. Yeah.
That's one of the ones that I never forget. I always come back to that and go like, how? Yeah. But I think, each series has probably yielded little ones that stay with me. And, I just feel very grateful for things like, Room 611, Louis Belt, Elton's Phone, these ones that have kind of feel like they've grown somehow bigger than the whole series. Now, Elton's Phone was about a child's toy, a Fisher-Price chatterbox telephone that seemingly got possessed. And now I keep being sent photos from charity shops around the country of people giving away these phones. And clearly,
there's so many of them.
I'm sure they're not very happy about it, Fisher-Price. But I've sort of started this kind of, wave of people going, get this out of my house. So that stays with me. But, like Louis Belt, today we have dropped the Uncanny Christmas special featuring us going back to Louis Belt.
No.
That is a case that we have returned to because it was a case that was so profound and so exciting the first time round, and it's one of those ones you can't forget. So we've gone back to that, and people can hear us going back and exploring the Louis Belt case again. So
I can't wait for that.
So I think the ones I keep going back to, I love. Room 611, Louis Belt. And the nice thing is you always worry of any of these things. You go like, have you done the best? Have you already reached your pinnacle? And actually then a case comes along like Meadow Cottage, which we just did for the Halloween specials, and you go, oh my God, that's amazing. And you have people saying this is the best one I've ever heard. So hopefully there's always, there's the best one is always
around the
out
corner
there in the future, kind of like a carrot on a stick. I
was up in Fort William earlier in the year, and we went up to, I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was a ski lodge and they got ski lifts going up. And I did a bit of a Danny Robbins. And I actually recorded it on video and put it on Patreon and did say, I'm not Danny Robbins and this isn't Uncanny, but I'm not far from Louis Belt right now. And I was only about 2.5 miles away from it.
Oh, really? Oh, that's close.
Yeah. And I was so enticed to go and look at it, but I just thought
it is a long walk.
Yeah.
It's about 9 miles walk from the closest place you can park your car.
Yeah,
it's quite a commitment to get out there. But I know that a lot of Uncanny fans have gone on pilgrimages out there, and it's funny. I love the fact that these kind of places have become like paranormal tourist destinations. Like you were talking about Elizabeth Dacre earlier, and I went there. Like when I did the original interview with Grant, I didn't go back to Tudor Close. I didn't go and look at the actual place. So I thought. I was down in Brighton with my wife and I thought, like, let's go and have a look. Let's go and wander across there. So we went across to Rottingdean, just down the coast. Go up, there's a kind of a cemetery next to the house. It's all a bit spooky. So we're walking through the cemetery and I just hear, Danny! And I look across and there's this family of Uncanny fans who've come across, this mum and dad and their kids who've also come to look at
think you
Tudor
live
Close.
there. I think you just live.
I love it. They were like, why the hell are you here? So it's great. I mean, isn't it exciting just to have this thing that you're interested in? I think like all of us, you want to have a passion, don't you? You want to have this hobby that kind of is this burning thing that you're desperate to get back to every moment you're not working. And, there's something about the paranormal that just hooks you in, it draws you in. And, so many of us were into it as a kid. And I just love that I'm seeing so many people returning to it now. People come up to me and say things like, I never realized how interested I was in ghosts, and I think, how could you not enthralled and enticed by these mysteries and by these weird moments in people's lives? So, when, another episode that sticks in my head, Double Trouble, where a bloke described driving in his car with his family and passing a car that was an identical car with an identical family in. So he saw himself and his family in an identical car drive past him. Yeah. And you go, what? Yeah. How? And you just want to know more. You're drawn in. So it's the amazing magical mystery tour of our universe.
It is magic, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It is. Yeah, it is fascinating. We also have similar things as well, don't we, Marie, where we will get Marie. We haven't long released a Blitz episode that Marie wrote, and the lovely comments that you get. I think it's the very, very personal comments that I like the most as well, that have really related to that Blitz episode.
It's human. They're human stories, aren't they? At the end of the day,
they're human stories. I think that's amazing. So going to 222, A Ghost Story, because you did say something earlier that really fascinated me, actually. So you were researching 222 when you were doing Haunted.
Yeah, I was. I mean, Haunted sprung from that research, and really all of the podcasts ultimately spring from that. So, I mean, 222 came out the same year as Battersea Poltergeist. Battersea came out in the January and 222 in the August, and it was this amazing kind of year of ghosts for me. Which every year since has been too. But I remember lots of people writing reviews and going like, "Oh, so the bloke who did Battersea Poltergeist has just written a play about ghosts," off the back of Battersea Poltergeist. I was like, no. I mean, I've been writing this for 5 years. I was writing it for a long time before Battersea, and it's really a product of so many things for me, and so many things that were going on in my head, so many idea arguments, lots of the things that you sort of see coming up in the podcasts and my programs about skepticism versus belief. It's all there in 222. But it really stemmed from a mate of mine saying to me that she'd seen a ghost, and just me kind of being very, very struck by her story and feeling that it felt very, very real, very tangible, but also thinking that everybody that we knew would react to her in very different ways, and that some people would be really disbelieving and sort of irritated even, and kind of mock her or question her mental health, all these kind of things. And I thought, if you could distill that and put that into a couple, then that would be a very powerful thing, to have a couple where you love each other but you fundamentally disagree and also disbelieve each other. Like if you have a problem where you believe there's a ghost in your house and your partner does not believe in ghosts, where do you go from there? So that's the basis of it all. And all the research that stemmed from that ended up being Haunted, really. And then Haunted I made with this American company, and then they went bust, but they owned the rights to it. And then so that was all very gutting, and I was kind of locked out of not being able to make my own idea, and it was very distressing. And then, one of the guys I'd worked with on that was Simon Barnard, who I make my podcast with now, and he kept sort of saying to me, like, got to do more, Danny, come on, you got to do another thing, got to do another thing. And I was like, well, there is this one story that someone told me, and it feels bigger than one episode, and it's about this woman who felt she had a poltergeist in Battersea, and she's still alive. She's in her 80s now. Should we tell that? And it all kind of went from there, really, basically.
Yeah, that was absolutely amazing. You share this kind of thing as well, don't you, Maria, with the writing?
Yeah, definitely. Because I'd like to talk about the book, because I absolutely loved it. Into the Uncanny, loved it, and I had a lovely time going for walks, listening to the audio.
Nice. Lovely. Oh, you heard the audio?
Yeah, I loved it. It was a variety of new cases. But there was quite a lot of it that did resonate, particularly the bit where you drop your son off at Laser Quest and then you dash off to the Enfield house. And I can really relate to that, because I've got 2 young boys. And I can imagine you're not quite sure which is scarier. And I just wondered, I was curious about how you balance the paranormal with the normal family life.
Ooh, that's a very, very good question. Very good. So it's not easy, is it? I mean, I think, it's important to say that it can't be understated how much my wife and kids hate what I do. They absolutely detest it. They are terrified. They don't like ghost stories at all. They really, really don't like it. Get really freaked out by it. I got a message the night that my first Uncanny TV program went out. I got this message, which was basically, tried to watch it. Boys got too scared. We're watching Bake Off instead. None of them have ever listened to an episode of the podcast, even though they appeared in them. My wife has been to see 222 and she did enjoy it. She came under duress, but she did enjoy it. I think it's hard. And it's like, in a way that maybe does keep things normal, because, I sort of switch it off. I come out to the shed, I record stuff, I write stuff out here, but then I go back in the house and nobody wants to talk about ghosts. So it's not like I'm taking it with me and carrying it around. I had a moment recently where, I mean, it's funny, like as things have grown, my wife has sort of started working with me a bit. She sort of helps me run my company a little bit now, and sort of helps, sort of plan some of the events. Like we're doing this Uncanny Con fan convention. She's very much involved in sort of helping organize that. So she's had to sort of take a bit of an interest, but still, like, she'll sort of say, like, who's this Ken? Who's Ken? Has he been in one of the episodes? Ken. I'm like, yeah, he's sort of been in one of the episodes. Yeah, quite a few of them. But but she's sort of been drawn into my world. So I've sort of thought, I'll vent. The other day I thought I'll just try something, and I'll just venture something. And I showed her this script I'd been writing. I'd been doing this TV drama script, a supernatural kind of basis, and showed it to her. And I shouldn't have done this. I showed it to her just before bed, and she read it, and she was like, this is, I don't know, this is quite unsettling, quite scary. And then went to sleep, and then just in the middle of the night, she just shot upright and absolutely terrified in the midst of this horrendous nightmare, sort of screaming about literally what I'd just been writing about, this kind of coming.
So she does believe, but she's scared. Is that what it is? Is that her?
Well, I think, I don't know, it's the idea planted in her head. It's a good question. Does she believe or not? I don't know. It's just the idea scares her, I think. The idea of something in her house, something lurking there. But she was so terrified. Then the next night I came back late and all the lights in the house were on, lights in the bedroom were on. She couldn't sleep without the lights on. It was, I felt quite guilty.
So you're working on something new then? Are you working on a new script?
Yeah, well, I'm really keen to do more fiction, more drama. I think I'm loving doing all the real life ghost stories, but I'm also loving the idea of kind of using everything I learn and kind of all of that stuff to then create some stories of my own, and like 222 obviously is like that. So yeah, I'm working on a TV drama idea, and I just I hope in the future to write sort of fiction for books as well. I think I love telling these supernatural detective stories, and I'm from a background of writing fiction. Albeit comedy. I wrote a lot of sitcoms. I love creating characters and creating stories. So I think I'd love to in the future kind of do both things, in parallel. Still make the documentary side of it, but also create some brand new drama stuff as well.
Is there any plan at all to actually bring 222 to the screen?
Well, we've had so many conversations about that over the years. Lots of exciting ones, lots of interesting ones with Hollywood types. But yes, I think so. I think it's just the question is when. Really, because I think it's still got this amazing theatrical life at the moment. It's been playing. I mean, it's insane. It's been on 5 continents around the world.
It's amazing.
And it's played from Australia to LA and all over the place. And we're coming back for a tour next year. We're doing another UK tour. So I think it's still on that journey. So I think it's about choosing the right moment, really. And I think we are talking about that, and we've had a lot of conversations about it. And I think it would seem a real shame not to make a film version of it at some point. So I hope that will happen, yeah.
So we always ask if you've got your own supernatural experience. Do you? I know you had a weird moment with the alarm and your dream the other day. I saw on Instagram. That was quite strange.
This was the other day. Because I was just going to say no to that
but
question.
You have.
Because I always do feel like a bit, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. I always feel a bit left out of these conversations because I've never had a moment in my life where I felt I really witnessed the supernatural, or I certainly haven't had a moment where I felt I saw a ghost. And I find myself living vicariously through the experiences that people tell me about, and it's a sort of state where I sort of, there's a big bit of me that kind of goes, I would love to see a ghost. And I definitely find myself going to places that are meant to be haunted, like, the few times where I've been to somewhere like a 30 East Drive or a, Woodchester Mansion, those kind of places. And I find myself going like, come on, show yourself, reveal yourself, But no, I haven't. But, it's funny you mentioned that. Like the other night, or the other morning, actually, when I woke up, in my dream, I was counting down 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then as I hit that moment, my alarm went off in real life and I woke up and it was deeply disorienting. But I don't think it was supernatural, but I think it does make me think that the brain is this amazing, mysterious thing, this kind of labyrinth of possibilities. And, we can never rule that out in all of these cases, just how weird your brain can be and the kind of mad stuff it throws up, and I have a lot of very, very vivid dreams. Yeah.
So, Teresa Chung, who we had on recently, she argues the case that actually a lot of hauntings come from us. That it's our sort of psychic energy, our brain that creates it.
Yeah, really interesting. I've always, been quite fascinated by the idea of there's that theory of recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, the idea that poltergeist events come from within people and it's kind of manifestation of inner turbulence. And it's a complicated, tricky theory because I think it takes you into the realms of victim blaming sometimes. I think it's often been wielded by certain people to kind of slightly demonize teenage girls, and sort of say, it's all your fault. This is all happening because of you going through adolescence, but the idea of things coming from us is really interesting, I think. And I think you can read that in different ways. I think, whether you're a skeptic or a believer, the idea of going through certain periods in your life and that period in your life generating a set of experiences, I think is something we can all relate to. Because I think, that we do have periods of our lives where we are in a more turbulent state of mind or a more open state of mind. And I think, I found myself going through lots of the contents of my attic recently whilst clearing my attic out. And I found this set of letters that I'd written when I was about 19 or 20 to a friend of mine. And it was like reading something written by a different person. It didn't feel like me. It was quite incredible to see this kind of young person who was a sponge, open to the world, soaking up all these sensory experiences, just incredibly excited by, sort of high on life, not the jaded, cynical old man I've become, and I think, I get a lot of messages from people at a certain point in their life, like a lot of emails recounting events that happened when someone's a student or, even as a teenager. And I think I'm fascinated by the idea that there are certain moments where we are open and receptive to things, and the gates are open. What's that quote about? There are things known, there are things unknown, in between are the doors. Is it Albert Camus? I think maybe I can't remember now. But that idea that there are moments in our lives when doors are open, I'm fascinated by that.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that goes with age as well, doesn't it? In certain aspects, that maybe the more you come out of childhood, the narrower the gap between those doors becomes until it gets completely closed off.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think so. We definitely close that. I think quite a few of the stories we've had on Uncanny are told by people who are older about when they were younger, and I think there's something about that combination that it's the youth that maybe gives you that moment in your life when you're maybe more open to things, or a skeptic would say more anxious, more prone to imagination. But then it's the age that allows you to be able to contemplate it and address it. And I think sometimes when you're younger, this scares you so much that you can't really process it or talk about it, and to articulate it is sort of tantamount to sort of opening a door for it to come back in a way. You're kind of frightened of reliving it. And then as you get older, I think you become able to maybe explore it a bit more, but also sort of, it's never quite left you. It's that kind of itch you can't scratch. It's that thing you keep going back to, and there's a need to address it more and more. I think as you get older, there's a real need to address it. So I think that's often the kind of set of circumstances that brings someone to me. I think it is a kind of person wanting to address something that happened to them when they were younger.
Obviously, you've got Haunted, Batsy Poltergeist, Uncanny, you've got 222 A Ghost Story. All of Danny's things are out there, ready to be discovered. So if you haven't already dipped your toe into either Uncanny or something else, then please do so. Danny, thank you so much for this interview, and thank you so much for taking the time out.
Oh, well, total pleasure.
Happy Christmas.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, and happy Christmas.